Hello everyone and welcome to the speaker series, a monthly webinar about bigger picture issues aimed at financial advisors. Thanks for joining us. My name is Adam Saville, Chief Editor for Vitality. And before I introduce today's special guest and hand over to our host, Mark Baldwin, Vitality Invest Distribution Director, I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you a bit about what we've got lined up for the next speaker series on July the 14th. We'll be joined by some key industry influencers, including Tony Mood from SJP and Plus Finance Commercial Director Matthew Chapman, to tackle the social care problem and explore what role financial advice can play, especially when it comes to using protection options to support later life care and intergenerational wealth, especially with people living longer and with dementia on the rise. So please remember to book your place via the Vitality Advisor website or keep an eye out for email updates to register your place. On to today's session. So it's impossible to ignore the cost of living crisis we're facing in the UK today. And this is inevitably having an impact on the conversations that financial advisors are having with their clients. On the one hand, members of the public are acutely aware of the need for financial resilience, many of them thinking about the future. But on the other, there's less money available to households at this time, as energy prices skyrocket and with inflation on the rise still. So this is, of course, putting people's finances back in the spotlight as people look to find the best way to get the most out of their money. And you don't need us to tell you that, no doubt. So to find out more about what advisors can do to support potential clients at this time, I'd like to welcome Vitality distribution expert Mark Baldwin, who's joined by Peter Komolafe, who you may recognise from Channel 4's Secret Spenders or from his Conversation of Money podcast, and an ex-wealth manager and financial advisor himself. And please remember to get your questions into Mark, who will have some time to ask Peter throughout the conversation. But yeah, it's my great pleasure to welcome you both. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Morning. Thanks, Adam. Morning, Peter.
Morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Listen, welcome. I mean, first of all, let me share with our audience that you and I are old friends. We're ex-colleagues. It's great to see you. It's great to have you with us. So thank you very much. And really, to echo Adam's comments, it's great for those that have dialed in and joined us for this speaker series today. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Listen, the next 45 minutes, let's explore the current challenging economic backdrop. We want to talk about how this is impacting advisor and client conversations, and really, Peter, get your views in terms of, how advisors can support their clients and help them navigate through the challenges. And just to come back on some of the aspects that Adam spoke about, the cost of living crisis, energy prices soaring, inflationary pressures. We've seen just this morning the new inflation rate issued in excess of 9%, a 40-year high. Interest rates are on the rise. We've seen 5 rises on the bounce to take us from a 0.1 Bank of England rate to 1.25% currently. We've got inflation possibly up at 11% before the end of the year, and more interest rate rises being predicted, possibly in excess of 2% even before the year is out. You add into that global market volatility and the peaks and troughs, the swings daily of global indices. All of these are having an impact on clients, and all of them are here to stay for the foreseeable future. So tough times, I'm sure you agree.
100%.
We'll get to those points. That's what we want to unpick. But firstly, I just want to again come back on something Adam said. You've been a wealth manager, a financial advisor. You're in the arena of financial education now, a TV presenter, a financial influencer. Just talk us through that journey.
Yeah, so I came back, I came out of the advice arena in 2019, roughly. I started what I do now in 2020, literally at the beginning of the year before the pandemic actually hit. But the main reason for me was that, through 15 years in the industry, I couldn't help but think, as I picked up and learned a lot of things, that I wish that I'd known those things when I was much younger, and the impact it would actually have. So everything I do now is pretty much born out of that. We live in a society where, unfortunately, financial education isn't greatly taught in our schools, and what that means is that you have previous generations, current generations learning from, I guess, mistakes and as and when they need products, really. And now certainly we're seeing the importance of money and how that interfaces with financial well-being, and that for me is a really big driver, because that's a really big topic, talking point at this point in time. So everything that I do is centered around that. It's about having conversations that I wish someone had with me when I was in my 20s, really, so that they can make better financial decisions.
Okay, excellent. And you mentioned then, just in terms of financial education and particularly, I think, different generations and their access, and you mentioned schools. I think it's fair to say that, you know, financial advice at this time is needed more than ever. But what are your thoughts on people fully understanding the value of it, and maybe in particular different generations perhaps as well?
I think that there's absolutely a gap where people don't quite appreciate the role and the value that a financial advisor can bring into their financial situation. I mean, what I found is that there tends to be a lack of trust, a lack of awareness generally, and an understanding about what the profession is all about. And unfortunately, with today's age where you have, you know, social media, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, financial advisors are in direct competition with those streams of mediums, even if you don't realize that that's what you're in competition with. And I think depending on where you pitch clients in terms of their journey in life, whether they're older or younger, their perception of financial advice is very different. For a lot of people who are a little bit older, they may know that, okay, I need to see a financial advisor, but it's okay, so how do I contact financial advisors? It's a prime example I get all the time. What does a financial actually do? What services will they be able to help me with? How much do they charge? That's often a really big off-putting point. And so, you know, it is an issue, but it is something that can be worked on, and there is scope to actually improve it. And I guess we're talking a little bit about that through the course of this discussion in the next 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, maybe a point I come back to in terms of some of the things you mentioned then, particularly around social media. But just on the back of what we were just talking about, what about the current backdrop then that I mentioned? What influence and impact is that having on either the recognition of the importance of financial advice, or even for those that are engaged in it, the conversations they're having with their financial advisor?
I think it brings it more acutely into the equation, because look, let's face it, everybody is pretty much struggling at the moment. I mean, energy price increases, if you're not into a fixed energy deal, I mean, I've seen mine increase by £100 a month already. And what that does, it puts a microscope on the day-to-day financial habits that people have. Now, one of the great things that, you know, advisors are able to do, because you've done it all your career pretty much, is garner a lot of soft facts about customers. And for me, even when we were shooting, you know, Secret Spenders, one of the things that I found was it didn't matter how much the household was bringing in, all of them missed how they were spending money. And I think that's a really big opportunity for financial advisors to really go back to basics and actually really use some of the soft facts that you've garnered and gathered for all of this time to really help people understand, right, where can we make some real changes, real impacts in terms of the day-to-day when dealing with the cost of living crisis. And I think that will bring a different dimension to financial advice and the relationship with clients overall, really.
Okay, excellent. I suppose you referenced the TV program there. Just go into that a bit more detail. Any specific things that you drew out in your experiences with households, with the general public, that might be, you know, some good hints or tips or ideas for the audience?
Yeah, so I mean, with every couple that was on the show, I got a brief on them beforehand, and so I said to the guys before I signed up, look, I want to see all of their financials. So I received all of their bank statements, as you would normally do when you're doing, a fact find. And what I did with every single one of them is I did a budget analysis, because for me, that is the foundation. It's the basis of everything. It tells me how much you got coming in, how much you got going out, where your money is essentially going. And pretty much in every single instance, there were circumstances where we had a couple that was spending 44% of what they earn on a monthly basis on online shopping, Amazon, and a whole host of other things. And when you tell them that, it's a massive surprise, 44%. And it's like, yes, these are the numbers. This is what it looks at. And the surprising thing is they're completely oblivious to it. They don't know, they're completely unaware, because they've not sat down to actually have a look at the numbers. I had a look at the numbers, and I can point out and say, look, what do you think of this? It's a bit much, don't you think? And it's like, yeah, we could use this money for something else. And as financial advisors, I guess financial advisors are accustomed to dealing with more complex things, whether it be investments or protection products and things like that. But I think there is an opportunity to step back and look at some of the basics, particularly now, because there are, in most households and most budgets, there will be fat that you can cut, and people will be quite surprised sometimes.
Okay, and so possibly a shift in households' needs and views, and possibly behaviour is on the cards. Again, you see that as a territory for financial advisors?
100%, because I think at the core of what any financial advisor does, it's, you're getting to know your customer, aren't you? You're getting to know what their aspirations and their dreams are, and you're trying to figure out a way to utilize the cash that they're bringing in to build and accomplish those goals in the future, whether that be in an investment strategy or whether that be with a protection policy. I mean, particularly with a protection policy, what you're trying to do is you're trying to put some bubble wrap around their livelihood and their lifestyle. And I think even looking at it and talking about it from that point of view, reviewing what those core goals are in relation to, look, how are you finding things right now? Obviously, you're probably seeing things go up. I think it's a different kind of conversation to have, which, if you haven't had it before, may be a little bit uncomfortable for clients, because you're going back to basics, but it can be important and a refreshing one as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Peter. So I think, just in terms of your experience then, do you think this is it's a challenge convincing clients on the value of financial products, and particularly why they're so important against this current backdrop? Or do you think, conversely, that there's actually a growing level of awareness now that is a real opportunity for advisors to step in and really take hold of those conversations?
I think that there is more awareness out there than you may originally think. I mean, again, social media plays a big part. And I'll give you a prime example. I mean, I've been on YouTube now. This is my 3rd year on YouTube. This is the 3rd year of the podcast. And I had a lady who has been watching my YouTube channel and listening to the podcast for about 6 months or so. She finally reached out to me. She said, look, I'd really want to have a conversation with you because I need to make sense of my financial situation. She has 10 million quid. Now, on the surface, you would think, well, there is no way someone like that should be watching YouTube and social media for financial tips given her circumstances. But unfortunately, people do. So I think there is more awareness out there than you think. And I think that ultimately, when it comes to the job of a financial advisor and trying to prove the value of financial advice, you can't really discount or just disregard the place that social media plays within that. I think it's pivotal in terms of it's a research tool. Google is a research tool. Google is owned by YouTube. YouTube is owned by Google, I should say. So whenever you search anything, you're likely going to have video results come up in the Google search. And if someone prefers the visual medium, they're going to go and get their information from YouTube because it's an explainer, it's easier to digest. Sometimes it takes a little bit less, I guess, participation because you can just listen to the audio with the visuals playing in the background. So there's a lot of awareness out there, and I don't think that should be understated.
Okay, let's dive into that a little then. just in terms of, I suppose, attracting new clients, we're talking about the opportunity of conversation starters. You kind of sit that in the domain of attracting new clients, perhaps. What are your views on best practice? You've mentioned social media, but just give us a few more of your insights in terms of what you see as best practice in that sphere.
Well, I think it's important to make sure that you're going where the news is and thinking about, what are the relevant topics right now. So at the moment, cost of living is the top of most people's agendas. The search volumes for that are absolutely insane. So starting from a point where people will be able to relate to the relevance of the topic, that's really, really important. But I think, if you include social media, and look, social media and that kind of arena, it forms part of a wider strategy. There are some really good financial advisors on YouTube at the moment. There's a guy in particular, he's got a massive community online. He's been very, 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 very successful in actually building that. But I think ultimately it's all about, at the end of the day, one of the things that someone used to say to me was, what do we actually do as an industry, right? We are a people person business, but we just happen to deal with finances and money and things related to money. Money is an intrinsic thing that is, I guess, relatable, and it transcends across every walk of life. And so when you're looking at social media, relevance is important, but making sure that when you go on social media that you're being as authentic as possible. To a certain extent, what I found is that on social media specifically, people don't necessarily care about what you do. What they go there for is they're looking for nuggets of information, something that's going to help them out immediately. And that could mean it's a very, very long cycle before you actually convert someone to being a potential client. But being there with some relevant information, some practical information, tips that they can take away, and being authentic, those are the key things that are really, really important to start off with a strategy that could potentially pay out big later.
Okay, interesting. So just again on that point, any tips? Because for many people this could be quite alien, maybe their first step in. I think if we go back to what we've spoke about at the beginning, you've been on this journey. It's the direction of travel you've taken. What are the key learns and the things to avoid, perhaps, that you have the experience of?
Yeah, I guess the first thing is try and figure out which medium you will go for. So social media, you've got YouTube, you've got Instagram, you've got TikTok these days. I mean, God forbid TikTok, it's just a nightmare. But you also have podcast mediums. So podcasts are absolutely huge. Obviously, this takes a lot of time and effort to create a video, edit a video, make it to the point where it's actually engaging. And that's the biggest struggle when it comes to video, making it engaging, making it informative. Some people may decide that actually it's easier to leverage all of the content that they have and put it into an audio spectrum, into a podcast format that people who go and listen to on the way to work, whilst they're in the gym, whilst they're on a walk. So picking out your medium first and foremost. I would argue that podcast is probably a little bit easier to do in terms of the production, and it means that you can talk about things that are a lot more relevant, but don't necessarily need to be as relevant in terms of, are we creating a video on a topic that is trending right now? Because obviously you want views on there. It's a little bit easier. I think with social media, though, this is the important thing. Compliance is the biggest, I guess, thorn in the side that most people will think about when they think social media. I think that that's a really important step to get right. But don't let it be a hindrance. There are people who are already doing it. I think you just need to be careful of the language. So, not using anything that is too direct in terms of it could be interpreted as advice. So making sure that you're using the language like could in opposed to should, those kind of things. And you're there as a forum for guidance, and pitching and framing the content in such a manner is really, really important. But for most people, it would start with compliance and then figuring out what medium you want to go down. Podcast for me, though, is just way easier to get started than the likes of YouTube, because there's a lot of stuff that goes in the background for that.
Excellent, Peter. No, that's great. Listen, I think a few things came out from me before I move the questions on a bit. Relevance, you mentioned, authenticity, and then that whole language and compliance angle. Those are the three things I took from that. So thank you. Listen, just a reminder to everybody that's with us. Certainly post any questions you have. We've got a few that have come in, so I'm just going to pick up, if I may, Peter. Just pick up a couple of those and put them in there. And then, as I said, to anybody else, still plenty of time to push your questions through. So we have one here that's really, I'll read this out. Look, do you feel the financial advice landscape is changing? And that's in respect of incorporating financial education and guidance and well-being in general.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, so my natural response to that is that I think there is a need for it to change. And the reason why I say that is because for the 3 years that I've been doing what I do now, there is one common theme that always comes up. It's not only that people don't understand what a financial advisor does, they don't really know how to contact financial advisors. Like, these are ordinary people. And there's, well, do I have enough money to invest? Will they see me? How much do they charge? Is it worth it? So on and so forth. There are a lot of people out there who are doing really, really well. And I will say the younger generation, I'll put the younger generation into this category. They're earning more than any time before in history, because social media is also for them a business generation thing. And for them, because they're getting so much information on the internet about, well, you could go and buy this, you don't need advice, and it could be you can reduce your cost here and there. There is an opening for financial coaching. And when you think about financial well-being and how that ties into the entire picture, sometimes you have to question, well, there are certain things that a financial advisor won't do because it's not within the remit of the job traditionally. And I think that needs to change a little bit. We need a fresh set of eyes on the circumstances that people find themselves in right now, in terms of the challenges that they're facing and how they're accessing information, and just their general perception of what they need to do when it comes to building for the future from a financial standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ryan, for that question. I'm just going to come back in on it a little bit in terms of, we often talk about adding value, and we've spoken this morning about the perception of value and the importance of advice and what client mindset is. What do you see as the health and well-being benefits of financial advice and good financial planning? And how do you see them connected?
I think it's really, really important. I mean, just if you look at the stats, and I looked at some of this morning from some previous work that I did for a brand. So when you think about the population, 41% of men and 32% of women worry about money. And that's before things of like relationships, career, and health. It is the biggest worry that most people have. And when you take that a little bit further and you then say, okay, so if you have that size of the population being worried about finances, money as a general piece, then what does that actually do when it comes to health and mental well-being? Well, if you're worried about money, stats tell us that you're 4.6 times more likely to suffer from depression and 4.1 times more likely to be going through anxiety or suffering from anxiety. So when you think of it in that context, this thing called money, which is, something that is, I guess, even today, is very impolite to talk about as, as a country, we're British. It's really, really important for that well-being piece. And for years, we've focused on, physical health, that kind of stuff. We talked about mental health, but not particularly from a financial lens, a lens around money. And I think there's a huge opportunity there in terms of it does intersect with financial advice, because whenever you're planning a protection policy for a client, if you're having conversations around their dreams and their aspirations and the role that protection policy plays in their overall journey to protect them, to give them a good footing, it helps alleviate the worry, the financial stress, so on and so forth, depression, anxiety, because they know that they have some kind of protection in place. In context to things like the cost of living, though, that's where you get into the conversation of people saying, well, actually, I need to make some savings, so I might need to cancel my life insurance policy. That opens up another kind of conversation entirely, but it's intrinsically linked from my point of view when it comes to financial well-being, financial advice. Those two should be intertwined.
Yeah, I suppose interesting when that research was taken, and you know, if we play that research again in the next 3 to 6 months, those stats, those percentages of the men and the women worrying about money could be significantly north of the numbers
Absolutely.
you shared, 44%, 39%, I think you said respectively. So yeah, so important. I think then, you know, the role for financial advisors, you know, let's take the product aspect aside at the moment. Let's go back to that budgetary piece and that conversation. Do you therefore foresee that the kind of advice client conversation and the role may shift significantly during these challenging times? And what would that look like?
I don't think it needs to shift. I think for most advisors, they do a really, really good job at knowing and understanding what their customer's all about. I think it's all about getting a little bit more granular, particularly if you've got someone at the moment who's in that situation where I need to save some money, Mark. I've got an insurance policy here that's costing me 120 quid a month. I need to save this money, and getting really, really granular and back into, look, let's talk about what this is all about. You know, what role is this playing? It's there because of this, 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 and this. And when you start to have a look at the budget, start to go through the exercise of, right, all right, this might be something that's on the table to cut, but let's see if there's anything else that you could cut in its stead so that you can keep the policy in place. I mean, it's that old adage, isn't it? It's better to have something than not need it than need it and not have it. And things like life insurance and things like that, you want to have it, because if you don't have it and you need it, the impact is huge. It's so much more important to have those kind of things than having, say, you know, a Netflix or Disney Plus subscription, for example. So that budgetary piece and going through that budget, getting really, really granular with people to, number one, talk about, you know, why did we do this in the first place, and explore what else could be cut is a really, really good place to start. And look, in a perfect world, you'll be able to save everybody in terms of don't cancel this policy, but let's be realistic. It may mean that you need to revise the insurance policy down, you know, in some way, shape, or form. But I'm still a firm believer that you're better off having some protection as opposed to nothing at all and leaving yourself open. And I think those kind of conversations, being open with your client, is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, is it, I suppose that intangibility of protection in particular, you know, people don't touch it, don't feel it, you know, can diminish the value in their eyes. Is there I don't know, is there something that, and your views on, you know, something more tangible value that can help clients and encourage that constant engagement so that you don't get to that conversation you're talking about where it's potentially the product that's going to have to move out the way to ensure the budget stays in place? What could that look like?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. I mean, I used to write on the envelope for the policy documents, like, this is, you know, if they had I did one for a client once, and I said, this is Teddy's university fees, you know, that kind of stuff on the policy envelope. So if they go pick it up, they're going to read that and be like, okay, this is what it's for. I think it's little things like that, really, because, you know, insurance is very, very intangible. It's one of those things where most people will regard it as a waste of money because they never think it's going to happen to them, but you never know. And so little things like that, and it sounds harsh, but I think as an advisor, you always have to have uncomfortable and difficult conversations with clients. And I would always approach this with, or I used to always approach it, even when I do coaching now, I approach it under the same guise. Like, this is all about aspirations and consequences, right? Your aspiration is this is what it's all about, and getting people to visualize what they're doing this for, getting back to the why. The consequences of something not happening, well, canceling an insurance policy, for example, the consequences to the aspiration, bringing that back into focus, I guess for a lot of people brings that tangible element to what the policy is all about back into focus. So again, it's having that conversation, as uncomfortable as it is, but trying to be as upfront and as helpful, and I guess non-judgmental as well, because I think a lot of customers will be thinking about cancelling an insurance policy, won't be doing it because they feel proud necessarily of it. It's a difficult conversation to bring an advisor and say, look, that insurance policy, I'm going to get rid of it. They'll feel bad as well, because I guess they have that mindset of might be doing something wrong here.
Yeah, interesting, important points. I'm just going to flick back to the Q&A. Less of a question, but more a request from one of our attendees. Somebody wants those stats again from the research, those percentages of men and women in terms of the worry about, the worry about money.
Yeah, so it was 41% of men and 32% of women worry about money, and that's ahead of career, relationships, and health. And like I said, when you take that even further, when you think about depression and how money worries can lead to that, you're 4.6 times more likely to be suffering from depression and 4.1 times more likely to be suffering from anxiety if you're worried about money.
Thanks, Peter. Hopefully, Claire, you got those scribbled down as required. Just while we're referencing the Q&A, just worth me mentioning to you that a recording is made available of this speaker series, and it's available via Vitality Advisor and YouTube channel. Now, just another question that's come in, Peter, if we can. How important are regular client reviews at this time to avoid what we were talking about earlier, those policy cancellations that may be, on the table just to save money from a budgetary perspective?
I mean, look, if you've got clients, I would most definitely offer a review. I think it's really, really important, because you know what it's like, Mark. People don't want to ask for help because they feel like I'm a failure or I should know what I'm doing. And I always say this to people, I'm like, you're not expected to know what to do 100% of the time. That's why you have financial advisors. If you're working with one, that's why you have one, to help you in those kind of situations. And during reviews right now, where we've spoken about inflation, the cost of living, interest rate rises, the markets are pretty much in the toilet at the moment, a review right now would be really, really helpful. And again, going back and being really, really granular, almost starting from scratch. Let's have a look at it from your budget to the plan, review the entire thing, offer some additional help, because that's where you can really start to build value, and the clients will remember it. The clients will remember you when you're around, when they're in trouble or when things are difficult. And that's the difficult part of being a financial advisor, answering difficult questions when markets are down and things aren't that great. That's where you earn your coin, but that's also where you can build the most amount of trust with a client.
I think so. Interesting points. I suppose maybe the fear or the challenge is, taking that conversation in proactively, a fear perhaps of doing more harm than good, or, at least highlighting something to them that they may have not considered. What's the best way to go about this then, instigating those reviews and having those conversations without alarming clients or creating the wrong behaviors?
I think it's all about how it's framed. And the way I would approach it is, I'd just say, look, we know that markets are struggling right now. Cost of living is impacting a lot of people right now. What we're doing at our practice is we're contacting every single client, and we're offering, a review meeting to talk you through maybe some of the things that we found and we're sharing with clients. And we want to make sure that you're in the best position possible. And I think if you frame it in that way, in a helpful way, I don't think that the client will necessarily see it as, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? Or there might be bad news. There might be bad news coming. It's all about how you frame it. If you frame it in a positive light of, look, what we're trying to do here is we just want to make sure that you're in the best position possible. For people who need the help, who may have been a little reticent or shy to ask for that help, that will be greatly received, I would argue.
Yeah, no, good point. Thank you. Peter, just a comment that's come in. Somebody has mentioned they love the idea that you mentioned about writing the goal statement on the policy envelope and things. So already people are reacting to the views and the insights you're giving. So thank you, and thanks Sharon for posting that comment. Just, I suppose, coming back to something we mentioned earlier about broadening the client base. So advisors that want to grow the business, you know, perhaps they're new into the industry and they haven't got the many years of building clients and working with different clients, and they're trying to attract new clients. Is there anything that you could give to them in terms of guidance or views that would help them, again, particularly with the current climate as we see it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge opportunity right now. I mean, never in the history that I know of in the UK has financial awareness and the interest in things like investing and building from a financial footing been this high ever. And that is directly attributed to social media, 100%, because there are different ways for people to access information. If I think about my channel, the biggest bulk of people that actually follow me are between the ages of 25 and I guess about 55. And that's been growing on the older side as well. But if you're kind of like new into the industry, you don't have an established client book and you're relatively young, you should be getting involved in that space 100%, because there is a thirst for information. And one of the great things that has happened that I've noticed certainly this year, since the markets have taken a bit of a turn, is there's a lot of misinformation out on social media, be it on podcasts, Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. People are seeing through this stuff now, and people are looking for credible information. So when I say financial advisors are needed, they are needed, sorely needed. People that can provide information from not just from an opinion point of view, but from an experience point of view, backed by insights, data that all of you guys will have access to. That is really needed right now. So please don't miss the opportunity, because one thing that I hope that the FCA does is they get involved in this space on the social media arena. They're bogged down with a lot of work right now, but having more financial advisors in the space will shore up the information that's going out there, and it's a big lever for the future. I mean, we talk about the intergenerational wealth transfer in the next 30 years in the UK, that's rumored to be 5.5 trillion pounds. And this is a really important point, because that money is going to be going to people in the age group of 24 to 44, right? Who at this point in time, when they think about investing or taking anything out when it comes to financial products, are all on their phone. And if you're not in their faces, on their phones in some way, shape or form, engaging with them through podcasts or whatever medium you choose, you potentially lose that customer. And these people they're facing new challenges. You know, getting on the property ladder for most people that I speak to is a real challenge. It's a big goal. How do they go about doing that? It's a struggle. You know, when they do finally get there, how do they protect themselves to make sure that they don't take a backward step if pandemic or something like that hits again? So it's a huge opportunity, and I would encourage really think about it hard, pick your medium and really go for it.
Yeah, Peter, a sobering thought in terms of that wall of money, as I've seen it referred to. And again, I'll kind of replay back to the comments you made earlier, particularly around social media, the relevance, the authenticity, and the language. So, you know, those three just really resonate in terms of the importance of what you've just spoken about, and in particular the demographics, as you say, that are set to inherit that flow as it heads down. Really from me, penultimate question. If there's any more that come through on the Q&A, we'll pick those up. But penultimate one from me. Right back to the start, we spoke about the journey you've been on. You talked us through at a high level what that looked like. What made you decide to take the leap from financial advice into education and the TV presenting and the podcast and being an influencer? What was the driver there, or what were the drivers?
Well, look, I should have done this. I mean, look, we worked together, met between when I was there 2012 and 2017. All the time I was there learning about pensions and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I wish, and you know, from my personal journey, I share this online. My dad, he got to 58, realized he didn't have a pension. And I remember when I was at Met, when I was learning about pensions, I was like, that's what my dad was speaking about. And all the way through all of that period of time running up to 2020, I had a ton of epiphanies, like recalls of personal things that I'd heard in my household when I was a kid. And it really did make me start to ask the question of, if I'd known all this stuff when I was in my 20s, I would have been able to make better financial decisions and be in a better footing from a financial base right now. But the final push for me really was, it was a gut feeling. I had this, I think it was about September 2019, after putting it off for maybe 2 years, because I looked at it in 2016, just as I left Met. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go and advise for a bit. But I had this really, really strong gut feeling in the September of 2019 saying, you need to do it now. And so I took a few courses, uploaded the first video on January the 6th, 2020. I didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. The pandemic happened in March, and everything took off from there, because obviously investing and money and all that kind of stuff was a big trending topic at that point. And that saw the podcast grow, that saw the YouTube channel grow. But it was really just a gut feeling more than anything else. And I'm glad that I listened to that gut at that junction.
No, absolutely. And I'm sure many others are equally glad you listened to that gut feeling and followed that kind of intrinsic view that you had inside. So well done. Listen, just final comments then, really, conscious of the time. Is there anything that you want to add to what we've spoken about, or is there something that we haven't drawn on that is absolutely relevant that you want to impart to the people that have joined us today?
Yeah, I think, look, if you've been tuning into this, I really want to encourage people to look at social media. It's time consuming, it's hard work, but going back to the demographics, I think there is a huge opportunity, massive in fact. And I think the danger that we face within our industry is, if you're looking after older clients, you need to start thinking about where that money is going. If it's going to go to their children, to the younger generation, and you're not already interfacing with them, what makes you think that you're going to have part of that money when it goes over? Because trust me, they are looking at all kinds of ways of managing their money, investing their money, and all this kind of stuff online. And if you're not there, you are missing a trick. You are sorely needed. I see so much online sometimes, it drives me nuts. Misinformation, just people spewing a load of nonsense about pensions and protection and all this kind of stuff. There needs to be more credible sources of information. And yes, the compliance piece is a bit of a pain, but it's not impossible. You can do it. So consider it as something. And believe me, the £10 million client that I referenced earlier, she came to me for coaching. I introduced her to an advisor that I work with here in Birmingham. She's now with him. And it may be a bit of a slow burner, but what social media allows you to do is build trust over the course of time through content streams that people can reference back to find out what you're about. And when you have that trust, believe me, they will do what you prescribe to them as the best way forward, because they've listened to you for so long and they've watched you for so long, and they just intrinsically trust you. You win half the battle. And the great thing about social media is it's an evergreen machine. The content will always be there. It will always be available. It will attract new people almost every single day. And that in itself becomes a little bit of a sales funnel for you to build clients and actually to build a business moving forward. And without even thinking about, the intergenerational wealth transfer, just what you can do in the interim is absolutely huge. It's invaluable. So please consider it carefully and take action.
Thanks, Peter. Great insights. I'm afraid that we've had a raft of questions come in, so you're not heading off just yet, because these are kind of in response to the things that you're talking about, and I think it's worth sharing them and allowing you to give your views. The first one's quite specific, and it's specific to investments. And somebody's asked, look, for clients that are involved in the markets and the volatility is there, and they're, if they're tracking things on a daily, weekly basis, they're seeing it move around significantly. what would you say to those clients around, you know, intervening and taking action, or just leaving things the way they are?
Okay, so when I'm on YouTube, I'm really cautious around how I position things. So the reason why a lot of people now are all about, you know, we're going to check this every single day, and you know, I'm going to track my investment every single day, is because there is a certain corner on social media telling them that that's what they need to do. The terms trading and investing are the same thing in their book, and it's one of the things that drives me nuts. They're completely two different things. So generally speaking, when I speak to people on YouTube, I talk about all of the principles that you would speak to a client about when you're a financial advisor. What you're looking to invest for, what timeline are you looking at, what's your risk appetite. That dictates what you invest in. So if you're investing in index funds, ETFs, you don't need to go and be checking this stuff every single day. But a lot of people aren't in that boat where they bought ETFs or index funds or anything like that. They bought individual stocks, because now you can buy fractional shares, and that becomes like this thing where I need to check it every single day. I still believe that it's not the right thing to do, and I try to encourage people as much as possible to think long-term. Index funds, ETFs, those kind of things, you can just let it ride as long as you've got your risk appetite right and how long you're investing for and your goals are lined up. You shouldn't need to do anything. But there's a lot of social media telling them the opposite, and people get confused.
Excellent. No, some good points, and I'm smiling there because, you know, those comments really resonate with me, and things I pick up just in conversation with friends and family. Really, you know, you're spot on. I think just coming back to the social media point, we've had another question now. Thanks, James, for posting it. A very interesting question here. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with negative responses on social media?
Look, it depends on the day. It depends on the day. Some days I let it go. Some days I just don't, because there is a certain side of social media that is just thriving to either prove you wrong. And I'm like, it's personal finance at the end of the day. So technically, there is no right or wrong answer in what a person decides to do, as long as they decide to do what is best for them. So whilst I speak from general terms, there is so much nuance underneath that. And this is where I start saying to people if you want to get into the nuance and the detail, that's probably where you need a financial advisor, where you should be seeking to take advice. Because what happens is they access a lot of information on YouTube, then they realize, I didn't quite know everything that I thought that I knew just because I watched maybe 10 videos about a certain thing. They then open another can of worms and they realize, actually, I don't know what I'm doing. And so when you get into the nuance, you probably need a financial advisor. So sometimes I will actually, you know, get into conversations and debates with people to try and actually say, look, it's not a one size fits all. There's quite a lot of nuance here. Some days though, I don't bother responding to any of it. So it depends on the day, and it depends on the topic as well.
No, fair point. And I think maybe then for our audience, financial advisors, and go back to what you said before about compliance and language and all of those things, is there a slight shift or tilt in terms of how a financial advisor would have to deal with negative responses or negative comments?
I don't think so. I think it's all about how you frame your responses. Like, I'm never prescriptive in terms of you should do this, because like I said, there is too much nuance in it. But I think if you are on social media leading with, I am a qualified financial advisor, a lot of the time, the people who would think that they want to pick fights with you will just be like, actually, I'm not going to bother, because they know that you're a qualified financial advisor. They understand that it's not just some random Joe who's been on a trading or an investment workshop and thinks he knows everything about the markets and can predict what's happening. So I think it's all about positioning and framing. Definitely position that you are a qualified financial advisor with X amount, years of experience. And in the response, if you're going to respond to those kind of things, doing it from a kind of more general, but letting them know, like, listen, there's nuance here, and demonstrating there's some nuance as well.
Okay, no, excellent. Thanks for covering that. Listen, really, I'm going to bring this to a close. We're at 10 to 11, so important that we keep to the time that we set. Thank you so much for your insights, Peter, this morning. I mean, thanks, just you know, like you've said, the importance of advice, taking the conversation to clients, being relevant, going where the news is, all of those things I'm sure resonate with the audience. And then in particular, the social media aspect and, you know, stepping into that and making that work for you, particularly from a demographic of client perspective and growing the client base, all great things, all underpinned by the reality of what we all face, and that's the cost of living crisis. It's going to be tough moving forward. We know that, we outlined that at the beginning, and what you've shared with us today give us and the audience some options, some pathways to travel to help clients, which is, you know, really the important thing, isn't it? Let's help clients navigate through these challenging times ahead. So it's been great to see you again, great to have you with us, and I really thank you for giving up the time this morning. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And then to all of you, thank you for joining us as well. And back to what Adam said, the next speaker series is scheduled for the 14th of July. So please do remember to register either via the social media links or via our website for the next series. I wish you well, and thank you very much for joining us.